Hey, Bulls and Bears, back with another dose of economic reality. You're watching Bull, Boom, Bear, Bust. My name is JJ, and as you might be able to tell, I'm a little bit congested today. Nothing serious, but it's either a kind of a bad cold or a mild flu, one or the other. So I've got my headset on. Hopefully, you won't have any problems hearing me. So thank you again for being here. We've got a lot of news to get caught up on today, some serious financial news here that we all need to be on top of, in my opinion. But first, let's start off with a story that surprised me and shocked me a little bit, but it really shouldn't surprise me because we know there's a war against the people here in the United States, and things that are allowed to happen still blows my mind, even though I know it's how bad the system is. Um, Out of the hill here, you ought to be ashamed. 82-year-old Alabama woman put in handcuffs, arrested over a $77 trash bill was unjust and unnecessary, according to The Hill. Now, some of you may be saying, wow, that's outrageous, that's crazy. Actually, in some states, that is part of the collections process. Instead of garnishing wages and getting a court order, they have to get an arrest warrant, though. But instead of the garnished wages path, they can go immediately towards an arrest. And Alabama is one of those states. If you're curious about this, I advise you to look it up. But this is a real story. An 82-year-old grandma put in cuffs over an unpaid trash bill. She says that she paid it. The company says they didn't receive it. Whatever the case is, she ended up getting put in the back of a police car. And, I'll show the article here. So if you want to look it up, but pretty amazing, right? So we can send billions of dollars overseas. We can have homeless veterans. We can have grandmas arrested for unpaid bills. Everything just seems backward, out of priority, upside down, inside out. I mean, obviously, the powers that be, they don't want to fix things. They don't want to make it easier for the people. So when you see things like this, it makes you kind of second guess everything, doesn't it? So back to that holiday spending that we said, or that they said, the reports, the news said was a record holiday spending for Thanksgiving, Black Friday, Cyber Monday. And then we see a lot of reports of stores being very, very empty on Black Friday. Not completely empty, but compared to most Black Fridays, very, very sparse number of people shopping at these stores. Actually, several YouTubers went through the stores on Black Friday. I actually had family over. I was going to go do some filming out and about, but I did watch some videos, and the stores are very, very empty for a Black Friday. Now, what they're saying is so many people are shopping online, and it's record-breaking online numbers. Why this year? Right? The health crisis is mostly in the rearview mirror. Of course, I'm saying that as I'm sick today, but mostly, for the most part, the health crisis is in the rearview mirror. Why are so many people this year choosing to shop online? Now, we can see 2020, we had the health crisis. 2021, there was still remnants of the health crisis, the outbreak. Lockdowns, a lot of fear and trauma amongst the population. People not wanting to get sick, I can understand that. But here we are now, 2+ years past the onset of the health crisis. Is everyone afraid to go shopping in stores? I don't think so. That's another reason why I think the numbers are fake and phony. I think we're being lied to. And I think that's a way to try to incentivize people to go spend. They want you in the frame of mind where you're going to say, wow, look at all these people spending money. I guess it's okay for me to go spend money too. It's like keeping up with the Joneses type of thing. You see the neighbors doing it. Neighbors got a new car. I want a new car. Neighbors got a new mower. I want a new mower. You see other people doing it, you kind of follow along more easily. It's the sheep herd mentality, as many would call it. So yeah, we see things like this with the grandma getting handcuffed here for unpaid bills, and then again, we have to second guess everything that we read because we know that it seems like there's an agenda out there to break the American people. When you see how imbalanced everything is, that's my opinion. Please let me know what you think down in the comments about that law in Alabama, and getting arrested for a less than $100 past due bill. Right now, I know what some of you are probably going to say. You're going to say it's the law, and if it's against the law, then she should be arrested. I can see your point. If you think it's the law, it's the law. But just because something's a law doesn't mean that it's right. Just because some lawmaker somewhere passed a stupid law, an unjust law, doesn't mean that it's right, right? I can show you some countries where they made it illegal to leave your house, believe it or not. There are countries that pass that law. So do you think that's right, to arrest people for leaving their house? Well, we even saw some things in 2020 here that were pretty wild and pretty out there. And I guess if you agree with that, you agree with the resting, grandmas for these types of things. All right, let's move on to some other news here. This one didn't shock me. Axios, Business Roundtable CEO, Economic Outlook Index, and what are the CEOs saying? CEO optimism fading as economy teeters. That's what they're calling it, economy teeters. Now, it shouldn't be any surprise. We've seen several other CEOs out there with warnings, people like Bezos, Musk, and several others from banks, Bank of America. I think it was Citibank, also the CEOs from those companies had some pretty dire warnings for the U.S., and it's actually global. There's just so much debt out there. We're going to talk about the derivative exposure here in just a few minutes here and what banks and investment firms are allowed to do with derivatives. It's even wilder than arresting a grandma. It's way out there. But first, the CEO optimism. We saw Bezos come out a couple weeks ago saying, caution, do not buy any big ticket items. And that was surprising coming from someone like Bezos. Now, Amazon doesn't sell mostly big ticket items. They sell a few big items, but it's mostly, small items that you can ship in packages. So he is, probably not going to lose too much business by putting that warning out there. He was talking about large appliances, automobiles, things like that. So I'm doubting it's going to hurt his bottom line. But we're seeing CEOs come out, and that's not a very typical thing, right? Usually CEOs want to paint a completely rosy picture up until it's already too late. And then they'll say, oh, nobody saw this coming. Well, now we have the internet, and now we have a lot of financial channels out there telling you what the legacy media channels don't want to tell you or are unwilling to tell you. And that is how bad the economy really is, how it's being covered up, how we're being lied to, how broke people really are. So now I think they have to do the CYA and put these things out there. That way they can't get blamed later. Like what happened in 2008, we go back and we see all the people that missed it or that covered it up, like even the central bank, what Ben Bernanke, the chairman back then, completely covered up the implosion of the U.S. housing market, of the housing bubble. If I remember correctly, just paraphrasing here, he said that subprime was contained, and now people can go back and look and call them out on it, basically. And so now I think CEOs are being more cautious and trying to cover themselves, a little bit more by putting these things out there without causing too much alarm. But that's the way it is. They're going to try to cover it up. But now, since people are on top of it, channels like this and other channels, I think they have to come out and acknowledge the truth every now and then. WTOP News, 4 in 10 consumers expect the housing market will crash. Wow. So this is unlike 2008. In 2008, hardly anyone expected the housing market to go down because there were so many people out there saying it's not a bubble. This is the new normal, that subprime is contained. Like, of course, the chairman of the central bank, it was out there amongst many people. A lot of the news pundits, hardly anyone was talking about a housing bubble back then, with the exception of a few people, Peter Schiff. And even when Peter Schiff did go on the air and have an interview at one of these big media, big business news networks, a lot of times they would laugh at him, they would ridicule him, they would talk over him and point to other data like the sales numbers and the home price increases. They would point to that data as the reason why there wouldn't be a housing market correction or crash. Well, now most people are, I shouldn't say most because it's only 4 out of 10, but a lot of people now compared to back then, a lot more people now are looking at this, and probably because they have access to channels and information that they didn't have access to back then. A recent Lending Tree survey over 2,000 Americans found 41% believe the housing market will crash in the next 12 months. The survey was conducted October 18th. Crash is defined as a significant drop in home values in a short period of time. There's that word again, crash, those words, crash and significant. So what is significant? Some people say that what we saw now in a few cities, a 5% or 8% correction. Some people saying that's a crash. I would say at least 20% a year to be defined as a crash. But to each his own. It's just a word, that people have their own definition of. So what do you think? 4 in 10 people say there's going to be a crash. I still see a major correction. As far as a crash, I don't think so. There's still a lot being done behind the scenes to keep this market propped up, to keep the real estate industry from imploding. But we do have some good news for those hoping for a deeper decline in the housing market and a faster correction. We have the 10-year bond went up today by over 2.5%. We're back up to 3.2%. 6, 3.6 on the 10-year yield. That means mortgage rates will hopefully go up some for those wanting to see the housing market correct. You want higher mortgage rates. We all know what happens when mortgage rates are too low for too long. We create housing bubbles, and that's just what happened. Also, while I'm looking at this, let's not forget, let's talk about silver. Silver went from under $17 to closing out today was $22.45. That's a pretty big increase. Let me crunch the numbers on that real quick for you here. Just using even numbers here from $18 to $22, that's an increase of about over 22%. So those that were buying on that dip, like I didn't really urge because I don't give investment advice, but I said I was buying on the dip. And I think a lot of you here on the channel did as well. If you haven't, I mean, it's not too late. I still see silver going up into the hundreds of dollars. There's a lot of price suppression right now, a lot of manipulation. If you look at the COMEX, we see the amount of silver that's being exchanged on a daily basis. In some cases, in just a few days, the amount of silver that's traded is the amount that's mined when they get it out of the mines. It's an amount that they mine over the full year. So obviously they're trading just the paper derivative. It's not backed. They don't have the actual asset there to back what they're trading. And that's where you have this artificial price suppression. When the cost of a real world asset or something you can hold in your hand, when the cost of that is determined via paper trading or digital trading, you're going to see massive price suppression, and you're also going to see bubbles. In this case, it's suppression in silver. I'm still stacking at these numbers. When it hits 30, I think then it's going to fly, because then we know that the chains have been unleashed on silver. But we've covered here many times how the market in the precious metals is being artificially suppressed, and you have to ask yourself why. Also, why are central banks buying precious metals now like never before? Let me pull up an article on this. All right, I've mentioned this before, but let me make sure that everybody knows how important I think this is. Something big is happening behind the scenes with precious metals. Central banks know the deal. They know what's happening with the dollar, how countries are going outside the dollar, and how inflation and severe inflation, maybe even hyperinflation in the dollar, could be happening in the very near future. And as a result, central banks are accumulating precious metals like we've never seen before. Over 400 tons of gold purchases this year. Central banks globally have accumulated gold reserves this year at a pace never seen since 1967, folks. That's over a 50-year high in the amount of metals that these central banks are accumulating. Again, if paper money was the solution, why don't they just print a lot of paper money, get pallets full of paper money, and put it in a warehouse? That would be the solution. But no, central banks know that it's not real money, that it has no real world value. It does for now because people accept it, but just wait until the United States, we've already abused the privilege of having the world reserve currency. And other countries are catching on, and they're going outside of the dollar. We see the BRICS nations plus a lot of other nations will be joining with the BRICS nations to trade with each other amongst themselves outside of the dollar, and a lot of it involving precious metals, including gold. And I think silver at some point is going to be integrated in this, and I think it's going to be combined with a digital system. Now, that's the optimistic view. The non-optimistic view is that we're going to go completely digital, completely to a central bank digital currency or a CBDC, and that's going to be a whole new level of control and a loss of freedoms. And that's a nightmare scenario, to allow the central banks to allow people, or to force people to go completely digital. I think there's going to be a war between those two implementations, and I think it's going to be a battle between good and evil. I think precious metals are God's money, and I think that's going to be the good side. If we go out of this and end up with precious metals backing of our currency, I think that's going to be the win scenario. The bad scenario, the loss scenario for people, will be the digital currency that they want to have everybody under. It's going to be complete control, surveillance, manipulation of your currency, revoking your rights to use the currency. We've talked about CBDCs many times. I think most of you are on to what they're trying to implement here across the population. Another hint that people are not doing very well, more rescue programs. This is out of WGN Channel 9, looks like out of Chicago. Biden administration distributing $4.5 billion to help with home heating costs. Wow, $4.5 billion to help people pay their heating bills. Where would we be without all of the rent forgiveness programs, the moratoriums, all these programs to help people pay their utilities, to keep the lights on, to keep their homes heated? We could already be looking at a Mad Max scenario if it wasn't for all these shenanigans, all these rescue programs. The fact that we need all these rescue programs, that should really let you know how bad the economy is really doing. Speaking of endless debt, the amount of derivatives that are out there, there's a recent article out here today. Let me find it here. Article here today out of Bloomberg. Huge, missing, and growing. $65 trillion in dollar debt sparks concern. The BIS, that's the Bank for International Settlements, researchers highlight off-sheet dollar obligations. Folks, the debt is so enormous that people trying to gather the data can't even come up with a number because it's so enormous, it's unknown. But it's in the tens of trillions of dollars. We also have $100+ trillion of unfunded liabilities here in the U.S. Basically, paper and debt promises that can never be fulfilled, and it's just going to lead to things becoming a lot harder for people down the road. I can't tell you if there's going to be an implosion one day or if it's going to be a slow motion decline, but things are going to continue to get worse. That's why I always say keep stacking, folks. Keep preparing for what's coming because it's not good. There's something pretty wicked out there that's going to hit. Hopefully, it'll continue to be a slow motion collapse. But, again, keep stacking. Hope everyone's well. Happy holidays to everybody. Hope everybody's good. And we'll make it through this. We just got to keep on top of the news and talk to each other. I'll be reading your comments. What do you think about the arrest of the grandma? What do you think about the 4 in 10 expect a housing market crash? What do you think about the CEO warnings? Are they just doing that to save face, or are they onto something? Do they see what's happening out there with the consumers and all these what I think are fake holiday spending numbers with the empty stores? Please let me know. Thanks everybody for being here. Bye for now and peace.